This gentleman was actually the first of all the speakers at any of the events that I actually met first. So we met at the Real Man Conference back in Amsterdam back in 2008. So this was just about a year and a half after I started doing this stuff. And I was really high energy. You can still find the video on my YouTube channel. It's like one of the really old videos. I was super high energy and I was running around talking about like having 1,200 different hilarious openers for every situation. It was very different than what I do now. And I saw Johnny, and it was one of the best speeches I ever heard. He really sucked me in, and I sat there just totally listening to this guy talking about his beliefs on women and how you can be dating lots of girls and girls love orgasms, and it was a complete different belief paradigm that I was used to. I've never heard anyone talk about that. Just it's totally cool to have like one girl sucking your cock and another one comes over and you can all do it together and don't be jealous. It's all wonderful. Everyone should have sex with everyone. I was like, holy shit, this is awesome. And then so it really affected me, and then I went on eventually to have 2, 3. Sometimes 4 girlfriends all at once, and they all knew about each other, and I've got pictures of me with like 2 girls, and I'm dating them both. And that was directly because of Johnny. I wouldn't have had 2 girls that I'm sleeping with while there smiling if it wasn't for all this stuff I learned from him. So definitely one of the biggest influences of mine, my whole journey, and really knows this stuff. So pay attention, and please make some noise and make him feel welcome. The one and only, Johnny Soporno.
Unaccustomed to public speaking as I am, oh wait, no, that's not true. This is basically most of what I do. I travel around the world doing what I describe as stand-up philosophy, trying to bring some new ideas and new approaches into the minds of people so that they can reassess the things that they've always accepted as true, because most people believe the things they learned when they were too young to realize that they were being trained. Most people believe without question everything that they cannot remember why they know. Think about that for a second. Anything that you know, if you cannot remember having learned it, odds are good you believe it without question. This can be tremendously negative, because all sorts of things that would not stand up to scrutiny are accepted by everyone. Things that are completely and fundamentally irrational. I'm going to describe a few of them because they'll really matter to you as sexual creatures, as humans, as men, as leaders of other men. And you need to be able to come to comfort with these things, because once you can throw away the paradigms that have been keeping you living in fear, you become free. It's a wonderful line in the movie Blade Runner. One of the characters says to another, "Painful to live in fear, isn't it? That's what it is to be a slave." Who here has fears? Wow, you guys are normal. I can tell you an interesting fact. I have no fears. In truth, I am afraid of nothing. This is not irrational. People say people don't fear anything. Stupid. No. As I was just saying to Sarah, I am not afraid of fans. This does not mean I'm going to stick my face into a fan. Not because I'm afraid of the fan, but because I do not want the inevitable outcome of sticking my face into a fan. I won't go and play in the middle of the Autobahn in the middle of the night, not because I'm afraid of cars, but because I'm pretty confident that the result of doing that will be something I wouldn't like. Okay. The only thing that I would ever be embarrassed by would be my repeating a mistake, would be my doing something that I knew in advance I would regret. So I never do anything I wouldn't do. That's incredibly empowering. It means that anything that I wouldn't not do is within the realm of things I would do, and I'll do it without question. I'll do it without any guilt or anxiety. In fact, who here is afraid of making mistakes? Interesting, interesting. Isn't it fabulous that we all grow up being afraid of making mistakes? I want you all to think about something really interesting. It is impossible to improve or develop any new skills, impossible to get better at anything without risking not being able to do it. By traditional definitions, it is impossible to improve in anything without risking failure. So if you're afraid of failure, if you're afraid of making a mistake, the only rational way to deal with this is don't ever attempt anything that you do not already know you can do. And everyone's ego likes to ensure that that's the way they deal with life. Your ego speaks up whenever you want to try something new. Anyone here suffer from approach anxiety? Okay, approach anxiety is this fascinating thing. It's where, like all other anxieties, our mind thinks about how painful it is to be afraid. We hate feeling afraid because it's uncomfortable. It's very dis-ease. It's hard to feel easy when you're afraid. So we don't like to do things that will make us feel afraid. In fact, when we think about things that have a tendency to make us feel afraid, we react exactly the same way as if we were already afraid, because it makes us uneasy. So anyone here afraid of the dark? Anyone here afraid of heights? All right, now if I said to you, hey, let's go rock climbing, and you start, oh, because you start thinking about it. And then of course, the more you think about the way you're going to feel if you're up there at a high height, the more it exacerbates your necessity not to have to want to think about that. Pretty soon, the fear of exposing yourself to that sensation becomes unsettling, but you haven't actually been exposed to anything you're afraid of. It's the pre-knowledge that just thinking about it will make you have to experience that causes anxiety. Approach anxiety is what happens in your mind when you begin to worry that you're going to feel the pain of rejection and the feeling of failure. So rather than have to deal with that, your brain says, better not to try. Only problem is, the more you don't try, the more you learn something critically important, and that is if you do not make an attempt, you fail. A failure to act is actually the only failure that matters. A success is not what most people think it is. The word success has been internationally and through all languages perverted from its original meaning. Who here can tell me what a success originally meant? What is a success? What do you think a success is?
Acting. Acting.
Acting, all right. I don't know how that works, but I'm going to see if there's someone else who can elaborate on that one.
Maybe fulfillment of expectations.
Okay, that's a very common position. All right. Anyone else? What is?
Maybe just being fulfilled.
Being fulfilled. Okay, I like that. But the original meaning of success is outcome. A success is an outcome. In other words, a succession of successive attempts will lead you ideally to an ultimate success, which will hopefully be a positive success. The succession of successive attempts. When someone succeeds someone else, they are the next iteration, the next attempt. You make an attempt, whatever your result is a success, the outcome. Every single attempt you make invariably yields a success. Sometimes it's not a success you wanted. Sometimes it's a success you would much rather not have had. It's just the outcome. Now, somewhere along the line, we retranslated the concept of success to mean a positive or ideal outcome, instead of just an outcome. And because suddenly a success became a positive fulfillment of something that we had had as a goal. We thought the opposite of success, which had always been the same, failure, was the only other option. Meaning, either you tried and you got the kind of result you wanted, or you failed. But that's not accurate. In truth, the opposite of a success, the opposite of an outcome, is no outcome. The opposite of the result of an attempt is no result because of no attempt. Failure is what you get when you do not make an attempt. Success is what you get when you do make an attempt. In every case, always. In every case, every attempt yields a success. When a person has made sufficient number of attempts and learned from their mistakes, they can truly become successful. A successful person has made all sorts of mistakes. As a matter of fact, my father used to say to me, make every mistake you can, just never make the same mistake more than once. Like I said, I'm not afraid of anything. I'm never embarrassed. Literally. Anyone here ever seen me embarrassed? Some of you guys will go back with me a long, long way. I'm not embarrassable, because in order to be embarrassed, I would have to do something I wouldn't do, which I won't do. But this gives me tremendous leniency. If you guys all said, hey Johnny, take off your clothes and dance naked for me, and it wouldn't bother any of you, then okay, fine. Because I'm not ashamed of myself, I'd not be embarrassed about it. Someone said to me, will you get naked inside the restaurant where we were last night to see if I would prove myself to not be embarrassed? Well, I said, I wouldn't do that because the other people here are not asking for that, and it would be very rude to suddenly expose them to a fat, hairy old guy when they're trying to have a decent meal. So, I am not embarrassable because I only do those things that make sense to me, that I'm confident in psychologically, emotionally, and in my conscience. I'm unperturbed. So when I've got this reasoned confidence, I make my decisions and I see what the results are. And the results of my decisions satisfy me in every case, or they teach me that I have made a mistake, so I go back and fix it. So I have no regrets, because everything I've ever tried was something that made sense to me at the time. If it made sense to me at the time and I do it, the results are a success. It may be a success I didn't want. So in an effort not to repeat those same things, I won't make the same exact steps. So, do I have approach anxiety? Fuck no. If I allowed my ego to tell me, Johnny, don't make an attempt, because you make an attempt, you might fail, and that would be embarrassing to me. I would become diminished because you would look less good in other people's eyes. I say to my ego, thank you for your concern. And I would say, if I remember correctly, there was a time when I wanted to walk up to some beautiful girl, and you said, don't do that. If you do that, she's going to laugh at you. She's going to make you feel badly about yourself. She's going to make you feel little. She wouldn't want to know someone like you. Just shut up and sit down. And I did. And what was the result? Nothing. I got no result because I made no attempt. Why did I make no attempt? Because you frightened me out of it. So, interestingly, there's a wonderful definition of insanity. It says, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. So, I'm not insane. I'm not foolish. So the next time there's someone interesting I want to go and flirt with or chat with, you say, don't do it, Johnny, because you know that if it doesn't go the way you'd like for it to, you're going to be embarrassed and that's going to be terrible. I say, no, what would be embarrassing would be my aggressively being insane by, again, not making an attempt. Because I already know how that plays out. I already know the results of not making an attempt. Non-desirable. To not make an attempt is to fail. I don't want to fail. So, thank you for your input telling me not to do this, but I'm going to go and do this anyway. So I walk over and I say hello, and if the girl is not friendly or whatever, it's just the way it goes. It's not my fault. I've got no approach anxiety because I do not go up to someone, no matter how lovely and how sexy she is, no matter how much I'm attracted to her, with the expectation that what she thinks of me matters. It matters to her, but it doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is what I think of me. I already know I like me, so if I see a beautiful girl over here, I think, ooh, I'm attracted. I know that she's attractive because I feel attracted. Hey, simple, right? I feel attracted, so I'm going to go over. I'm not going to go over there and say, hey, your judgment call about me will affect how I feel about myself. Because that's not true. But for most of you guys, your judgment about yourself is directly affected by how another person responds to you. And not just that, how another person who has no reason to know you or even want to know you responds to you. So you know you, and you suddenly decide that someone who doesn't know you, their opinion of you is more valuable than your opinion of you, despite the fact that you already know you, and they don't. So instead of walking over to a beautiful girl to try and get her to confirm me or validate me, I walk over to a beautiful girl to find out whether I can stand her. I approach a girl who I'm attracted to, because I'm attracted, with the intention of learning about her. And the more time I spend actively getting to know her, learning from her about the things that make her tick, I get the answers to the question that women, particularly beautiful women, virtually never get asked. What do you think is the question least asked of beautiful women?
What do you think?
Exactly. I'm not asking, I'm telling you. The question least asked of beautiful women is, what do you think? Guys, actually being interested in what other people think is the surest way to become instantly attractive to them. Howard Stern is one ugly mother. Okay? He's a radio announcer with 20 years experience getting people to talk about stuff. And his ability to get people to open up about themselves has made him incredibly compelling and attractive. Getting people to confidently speak their mind is incredibly powerful, because as soon as a person feels they have an audience, they feel empowered. Empowering another person is the greatest gift you can give to them. It allows them to make judgment calls and decisions to lead their life in the ways they need to. So, an interesting thing, I used to weigh 155 kilo, 350 pounds nearly. And I dated national beauty contest winners, Playboy Playmate, Penthouse Pet, been to bed with fantastic, fantastic number of beautiful women, despite the fact I've never ever been anyone's type. Because most people misunderstand something really important about the nature of male and female interactions. Men don't realize they project onto women. Question for you. Who here thinks that many women, that a significant portion of women, do not enjoy sex? Interesting. Who here has ever been of the opinion that women do not enjoy sex more on average and in general than men do? I'll tell you something. Most women would enjoy sex a hell of a lot more than most men do, because the sexual experience for women can be profoundly better. But most women just don't have the partners who can help them with that. In fact, if any of you have ever noticed that women have a tendency to artificially decrease the number of partners they'll admit to keep the number down to one that's not too scary, that won't stigmatize them or make them humiliated or embarrassed. Almost every woman has learned to logically equivocate, to change the meaning of words so that she can, without exactly lying, misrepresent things. You ask a girl, how many guys have you been with? And she'll say, oh, 8. Because she wants a number that's low enough. But if you actually were more explicit, and you say, you know, how many penises have you played with? The number might be 60. Because in order to have her number at 8, she would have had to have had a certain list of specific things that need to be true for her to have been with someone. Sometimes women will say, how many women have you been with, Johnny? I'll say, about 40. And they say, okay, I can see that's not so scary a number. The actual number of women that I've gotten off or been gotten off by is probably closer to 3,000. But 40 is a good number, and it's an accurate number based on that I only consider myself having really been with a woman if I've had penetrative intercourse with her and all her openings. She's done something, she's licked my semen off another girl's face, and she's done something to get rid of the hair on my back. If I've been kneaded, if she's been my depilatant, she's waxed me or shaven me. I needed to do this to get the number down to 40. I had to keep adding parameters so I could keep that number down. When a young lady comes home having just had sex with everyone on the football team and her father stops her at the door and says, where were you? Were you having sex? And she says, Daddy, how could you even ask such a thing? You know I don't even have a boyfriend. Oh, I'm sorry, honey. Have a good night's sleep. Or, you didn't sleep with anyone while I was out of town, did you, honey? Of course not. How could you ask such a thing? I was too busy fucking to get any sleep. Okay. Women are taught from childhood, what Daddy does not know won't hurt him. Because what makes Daddy happy is Daddy's belief that she's his little angel, a perfect, well-behaved girl. And she knows that her job, her mission as a young lady is to keep Daddy happy. He's her sponsor. As long as Daddy is happy, she feels happy. She loves him, he takes good care of her. She wants him to be happy, but for some reason there's all these fucked up rules that girls have to live under. They're basically impossible. Ignore what you want and do only what other people want for you. So of course, the answer is simple. Not getting caught misbehaving is the same thing as behaving. Not getting caught in a lie is essentially the same thing as telling the truth. If there's one thing all men and women can agree upon, it's you can't trust girls. This is not because girls are dishonest. It's because in order for things to make sense for most women, they need to ignore certain rules like A is A. They have to be able to reassess things so as not to feel badly, not to feel that they must punish themselves for their decisions. Consequently, women will artificially decrease the number of partners they've had to a number that doesn't make them feel badly about themselves. And most of the ones that they will not count are the ones that they didn't need to count because they never wrote about them in their diary and they never advertised to other people they'd seen them. So if you ask any of your close female friends, when they're complaining to you, I can't find a decent guy, it's been so long since I broke up with Gary, I haven't been to bed with anybody. You say, what about that guy you took home from that club that time? You don't need to be any more specific than that. That guy, that club, that time. The girl goes, oh, that didn't count. What are you talking about? He didn't have any condoms, so we just had oral and anal sex. Doesn't count. Or, oh, I went to bed with him and his girlfriend. It was a threesome. That never counts. Or whatever other ways she can exonerate herself so that she doesn't have to accept this, so that she can, with a straight face, give an answer that she believes will not offend her new potential sponsor, the man who's supposed to take responsibility for her when Daddy stops being responsible for her. Women crave security the way men crave approval. Think about that sentence. You men may never have realized to what a great degree men crave approval. There's a reason we don't walk across a red light even when there are no cars coming. It's because we don't want to be disapproved of by those other people who might see us. For myself, if I walk up to an intersection and the light is red in the direction I'm going and there's no cars coming, I walk across the street. Sometimes I look at the people who are standing there and I say, you know, not crossing the street now is kind of the same thing as talking to yourself. If I drive up in the middle of the night to an intersection which I know has a red light for 5 minutes before it changes, but I know there's no one coming in the other direction, and I can see for kilometers in either direction there's nobody coming. As soon as I'm confident no one is coming, I'll treat it like a stop sign. I'll continue through. Many people will eventually get to this point only if they drive up to the intersection and there's someone standing at the bus stop. They won't. Oh shit, he might see me. It's not as though this random stranger will have any impact on their world, but they don't want to be seen to be breaking the rule. Sometimes they'll still say, you know what, he doesn't matter, I'm going to go. And they'll go, then they'll drive up to the same intersection, there'll be another car sitting there next to them. They'll go, shit, I can't go, for exactly the same reason. Don't want to be seen to be breaking a rule. Sometimes when I drive up to someone who's stopped at a red light for many minutes, when they don't need to be, I'll call out to them and say, this light ought to be a flashing red light. It ought to be treated as a stop sign. Because clearly there's no reason to be stopped here. And I'll drive through. And they'll honk at me and they'll go, you idiot, what's wrong with you? And then 2 minutes later, as I watch them drive through the red light, and I think, ah, good, I've helped liberate that person from the stigma of his fear of being badly judged by others for doing something that was perfectly reasonable. I come back to the very opening remark I made, which is that the things that we cannot remember why we've always known are things that rarely stand up to scrutiny. Okay? Who here drives? Okay, now, when you stop off to put in benzene or petrol or diesel into your car, do you switch off your motor? Nobody switches off their motor with me? Yes. Okay, okay. Can anyone tell me why you switch off your motor when you fill up with petrol?
It reduces the danger of a fire.
How?
Having the motor running, there's electricity running, there's sparks being created somewhere in the motor, some slight chance.
Okay, let's address that. The motor is always the same distance away from the gas tank. If there were sparks in the motor that could ignite the gas in the gas tank, cars would explode at random wherever they are, not just at the gas station. You could say maybe it's because when you open the gas tank, you might get a spark as you put in the handle, but then it wouldn't matter whether the motor was on or not. Any of you got a better idea as to why it is we have to switch off our motor? We're told to switch off our motor. It may be law where you are to switch off your motor.
Better for the environment?
Sorry?
Better for the environment?
Interestingly, that's a reasonable thing, but it actually would only be true for a very, very, very brief window. People have only cared about the environment in a significant way in this generation, but the law regarding having to switch off the motor is very old. In fact, it's old enough to be obsolete. The actual answer,
yeah, maybe so people don't fly, don't commit flight,
so don't drive away?
Yeah.
Well, how much time does it take when you get back into a car to start it and leave?
Yeah.
Would having switched off the car before you started and left make a difference?
If the motor is switched off, you have the chance that you fly is less. You know what I mean?
I hear what you're saying, but I don't think you're correct. I know that for myself, if I get into my car, starting it and driving it away is basically a one-step move, and I never have to think about it. It's 0 time of flight. But
I once had the problem that the motor was like broken, so I couldn't restart it. So I actually asked at the tank step
if you could leave it on, yeah?
And they told me like, no, you can't do that.
Right. Okay, so here's the answer to the question. Why is it? It's very simple. Back before 1973, when there was the Arab-Israeli war, in which the Americans backed the Israelis, and so the Arab OPEC, the oil-producing and exporting Arab countries, put a cartel and would not sell oil to the United States, and that caused what was called the oil crisis of 1973. Two things happened in that year that were significant. First off, gasoline prices doubled and tripled from 25 cents a gallon, or basically 6 euro cent a liter, to 25 euro cent a liter, which was a major deal. And so, in order to deal with this huge thing, many petrol stations switched to offering, at a lower rate, self-service pumps, where you pumped your own gas, rather than having someone there who would clean your windshield, check your oil, and fill your gas tank. Similarly, in 1973, the catalytic converter, part to an engine that prevents lots of noxious fumes from getting out of your car for the environment, was released. Only catalytic converters required that you not use lead as an additive in your fuel, which was a protectant for your motor. So we had unleaded fuel, which had become popular. Now everyone's used to unleaded fuel. And we had very expensive fuel, so people were doing self-service. What does this mean? It means prior to 1973, there was a man, or occasionally a woman, whose job it was to stand in the same place where leaded gasoline was being burnt in the car, creating a big, smelly, smoggy cloud of toxic and poisonous vapor, while his job was to stand there all day long. Car after car after car after car would come in, so they had to, by law, switch off their motor so he would not die, this fellow whose job it was to pump gas. Only by 1975, that career had been diminished fantastically. Now there were very few people who professionally pumped gas. Almost everyone pumped their own gas. By 1978, credit cards had become so standard that instead of having someone fill you up with $4.10 of gas, give you a $5 bill and say, keep the change, now everyone was paying exactly the amount they were supposed to be, and almost everyone was enjoying self-service anyway, so they were only exposing themselves to the fumes for a very brief amount of time. The fumes no longer had lead in them, and in fact very little carbon monoxide because of the catalytic converters. So suddenly there's no longer any reason to switch off the motor in a non-broken car. A car that has a working catalytic converter on it using unleaded fuel produces such a low quantity of toxins you could park and go to sleep in one, and the odds are good you would survive till morning in your garage. I don't recommend this, but we all think about the idea of, oh no, there's terrible pollutants. We've actually done a lot of very good things for the environment by instituting the removal of lead from the gasoline, the institution of the catalytic converter. But we still have this law, and it's been on the books forever. And if you ask someone, why does the law exist? They'll come up with answers. They'll make shit up. They'll go, because the engine might explode. Right? This is not a rational thing. It just doesn't make sense. But we know there must be a reason. But the reason is actually so old, anyone here who's never had someone pump their gas for them will not even understand the concept. It's very simple. But no one removes the law, because just because they don't remember why it's there, they can't find a reason to remove the law. Well, you see, I come from a place where in the winter, sometimes it gets to be, with the wind chill, about minus 40. Minus 40, it doesn't matter if it's Fahrenheit or centigrade. That's where they meet. It's really, really, really cold. It means if you have a guest with you in your car and you go to fill up with gasoline, and you switch off your motor for 2 minutes while you're pumping gasoline, by the time you get in the car, they're very uncomfortable because it's cold. It also occasionally gets up to 100 degrees Fahrenheit, which is 38 degrees in the summertime. You don't want to leave someone in a non-air conditioned car for several minutes when it's that. You don't want to switch off your motor unless you have to, but people are so used to having to, they accept that they must. If I drive into a place and I don't switch off my motor, other motorists will say, what's wrong with you? You crazy? You're going to blow us all up. Because in their mind, that must be a risk. Otherwise, there wouldn't be a law. Okay? So there are all sorts of things we accept because they've always been there, even though they make no sense. Here's this. Who here figures it's more desirable to be with a woman who has had fewer lovers rather than more? Who here thinks it's desirable to get their hair cut by someone who's never cut hair before than to go to someone who cuts hair for a living 5 days a week? Who here would rather have their dentures worked on by a dentist who'd never worked on teeth before, or would rather go to a dentist with a long track record of doing a good job? For some reason, we have this myth that people should want a woman who is a virgin, because virgins are tight and the sex will be good. Interesting thing about virgins, after the first time you have sex with them, they're not virgins anymore. Hey! Funny that. In fact, virginity comes along with quote-unquote tightness because the girl's terrified. It's painful. She doesn't really know what to expect in most cases. As soon as she starts to actually start enjoying what she's doing, she loosens right up. In truth, Violet, my beloved, often fields this question for me because I always kick it to her. When people say, well, wait a second, if someone's having a lot of sex, won't they get loose? She'll say, interesting thing, you go to the spa, I was going to say gymnasium, but I realize that doesn't apply here. You go to the spa to work out. You see the guys curling iron. You notice how loose and flabby their muscles get. Of course not. The more you use muscles, especially when you use them under load, for lack of a better term, the stronger they get. Many of my playmates are professional sex workers, porn starlets, escorts, whichever. It is to their advantage to have excellent musculature, and they do, because they want to be able to delight their customer and get rid of him in 5 minutes. Some of them can twist off bottle tops, open Roche bottles. So, generally speaking, I would say, in my experience, the best sex is had with someone who is an enthusiastic professional. Next best, a very enthusiastic amateur. And then down the line, people who have had some experience. And the sex with someone with no experience is generally always dreadful for both genders. And yet we've all been told countlessly that we're supposed to want someone who's less sexually active. Why is this? Why was virginity something people were supposed to want? Well, the answer is very simple. You see, women were always possessions. Like pets, they belonged to their father until such time as he could vend them to their new owner, and they would change from their father's last name to their new owner's last name, and their new owner would then be responsible for them. And therefore he would presume he had authority over them. But of course women had learned from their own daddy, who was responsible for them, that the best thing they could do to keep their sponsor or master or owner or husband or father happy was keep him from knowing about the things they were doing that he wouldn't like. And so married women of all varieties have all learned long before they actually got married that daddy translates to hubby after a fashion. And there's a point at which the woman's job is to keep hubby from knowing about the things that she's doing that hubby wouldn't like. You have to understand, women are raised to this. They're taught this. And men accept it, but at the same time we also accept other things we know to be true. We know that a girl who likes us, who we meet, and who is enthusiastic about going to bed with us, without our having done anything like try to impress her, demonstrate how cool and smart and wonderful we are, bought her expensive things, well, that girl is too easy. And therefore, maybe we'll take her for a ride, maybe we'll go to bed with her, but we certainly aren't going to hang around because she's too easy. And we know that other people will say, oh, she's a slut, and therefore you will be disrespected and you'll lose that approval. The only reason a man does not want to go to bed with someone who has a reputation of being a slut is because he knows he will be made fun of by other men. Daddy says to his son, stay away from sluts, son. You can never trust them. I mean, sure, it's fun right now, but you don't want your friends knowing you're sleeping with a slut. And more importantly than that, the only reason I know you're my son is because your mommy was a good girl. She didn't put out till the 4th or 5th date. And after that, we practically never had sex. So I always wondered, since I'm Asian and you have African features, and your mother's blonde with blue eyes, how that worked out. But I'm not going to explore that because I'm happy in my denial. And so we have this situation. Men believe in something I refer to as Marx's paradox, named for the brilliant philosopher Groucho Marx. Groucho Marx of the Marx Brothers said, I'd never belong to a club that would have a guy like me as a member. Which is the same thing as saying, I would never work for an employer stupid enough to hire someone like me. Or the same thing as saying, I would never have a friend with such low standards as to have a friend like me. Or I would never go to bed with anyone with such lousy taste as to go to bed with me. Now think about that. That is utterly irrational, completely self-defeating. Completely. For myself, when I meet a girl who likes me enough to want to go to bed with me without my having to do anything to try and suggest to her that I'm better than I am, that I'm cooler than I am, without doing anything to impress her, I think, oh, thank goodness, this is a girl who appreciates me and knows what she likes. So I'm more than happy to go to bed with her because she's exactly the kind of woman I'd want to go to bed with. Someone who leads her own life for her own reasons, is not expecting anything from me except the enjoyment of my company. No promise of security, no guarantee of any sort, no promise of any sort of value. The only kind of woman I can handle is one who will choose me because she likes me, not because of the suggestion she might get some value from me. So, let's come back to another thing we all accept from childhood, despite the fact it is irrational and doesn't stand up to reason. In our society, we divide women into two camps. On the one side, we have the woman who does exactly as she chooses, without concern for social convention. She sleeps with whomever she likes, without the necessity for a contract or a guarantee of any sort, without any security, without any proceeds. She sleeps with them because she thinks she's going to enjoy it. And perhaps she doesn't settle down and have children at an early age, and she knows that she's going to get told by her mother, her aunt, her friends' parents, you'd better hurry up and start taking your life seriously. Forget all that silly wasting time being a radio announcer or a movie actor or a medical doctor or whatever it is that's consuming so much of your time, and become a mommy and a wife. That's how you can demonstrate your value in the world. Because your value clearly comes from the demonstration of the quality of the man who's prepared to sponsor you. It's got nothing to do with who you are as a person. So we say about a woman who is so reckless that she chooses to lead her life her own way, following her own value system, choosing to either sleep with or not, whomever she likes, for her own reasons, with her own discretion. We say that girl has no self-respect. She gives herself away for nothing. And we say this woman who has no self-respect, oh, she's a slut. She is beneath us because clearly she has no self-respect. Of course, there is the other kind of woman. The other kind of woman, the one who does have self-respect, so much so she would never give herself away for nothing. She always charges for it. Nice, huh? Either you don't charge for it and you're a slut and unworthy, or you do charge for it and you're a whore and unworthy. It's great, the things we do to women. Now, how about this one? We give women an out. We have a special version. See, the low status whore says it's okay as long as I'm bringing in that I'm putting out. Okay? I can go to bed with him. He took me to Tahiti. He took me skiing in the Alps. He promised to get me a better apartment, or he got me a better job, or he did my tax returns for me, or he fixed my brakes, or he got my kids into a better school, or he gave me €500 in cash, or he paid my rent, or he bought me jewelry, or he promised he'd love me forever and take care of me. As long as at least the promise of security is given, it's understandable why she would be prepared to negotiate and give up the sex, that greatest value that she's supposed to have. Now, if you stop and think about this, a woman is taught also that she has an option. If she really wants to be high status, she has to tell people that her sex is in such high demand, she's only going to make it available to a single client in exchange for a lifetime of economic support for herself and her children, who he will no doubt presume are his. And we have a nasty four-letter word for such a woman. We call her a wife. Remember, the wife does not have to actually provide sex. She just has to not advertise to others that it's available. At least not advertise publicly to others that it's available. See, the man needs approval. He knows if he has a wife, two things are true. One is, there's a good chance he will actually be able to have sex. Secondly, other men will approve of him. And thirdly, he might actually have children, which other men will approve of even more. It doesn't even matter if they're his kids. He has no way evolutionarily of knowing if they're his kids. He just presumes if they came through his wife, they're his. So we come back to the question of why is virginity so valuable? Well, throughout history, since women were always possessions, male children born would be the ones whose family would be responsible for the son. And the parents would say, okay, we need you to marry a virgin because you're the eldest in our family. We're going to leave the inheritance, the entire legacy of our family to you. So you're going to have to leave it to a child that we know is your child. And before blood tests and DNA tests, the only real way a man had any way to believe that his child was his own was if there was no other option. See, women have never been expected by anyone to be responsible for their sexuality. The reason chastity belts existed was because everyone understood that when a woman was horny enough, she'd get out and do whatever she wanted, just like your house cat. Overwhelmed by a desire. Only in the last 150 years or so, or less, have women been presumed to be sufficiently terrorized by the fear of God punishing them for committing adultery, or the fear of being caught. Historically, men have always looked at women as property. Alan was saying that there was a man who was telling him about how his father had been shot to death by the husband of someone that he was sleeping with. Why does a man get so angry, not at his wife, but at the other guy for having sex with his wife? Simple. The other man was getting what he's paying for. The other man is robbing him. He's paying for that punani, and the other guy's getting it. In fact, he's probably paying for it not just in money, but in putting up with her. And the other guy's getting all the good stuff. That thief. So, we all accept these things as underwriters. We never, ever, ever, ever challenge these thoughts. The idea that, in fact, a woman who makes up her own mind, leads her life by her own rules, governs herself by her own desires, reason, her own sense of accountability, we say she's got no self-respect. Fellas, anyone here figure that if you choose who you're going to go to bed with, it proves you have no self-respect? I'm sorry, I choose who I'd like to go to bed with because I have self-respect. So, if you teach women from an early age that yes is equal to no, that 1 is equal to 0, that true is equal to false, and that doing things that make sense to you to suit yourself proves you have no self-respect, then it's no wonder women get so kerfuffled in terms of what we consider honest integrity. The reason women don't trust one another is because, of course, there's this problem. When you have to logically equivocate away the things that are true so that you can live with yourself, it changes your view on what is true and what is not. In fact, one more step. Virtually every guy here knows what it's like. You hook up with your buddies, you're all making terrible insults to each other, but it's okay because you don't mean anything by it. You ladies probably know what it's like. You hook up with other girlfriends, and suddenly you're making all sorts of complimentary comments. Oh, I love that outfit on you. But it's okay because you don't really mean anything by it. See, women are raised from childhood understanding that they need security. It's the most important thing to them. Security is what they need. And security for women usually comes primarily when they're young in the form of having daddy who's taking care of them and doing what daddy wants, which is for her to be well received by others. Young woman is raised to understand her job is to have other people like her, to please other people. Young man is raised understanding that he is responsible for ensuring his safety and welfare. His security is his to control by doing what other people expect of him. He must have approval. Approval is the key to security for men. Who here understands that males are virtually always taught from an early age that it's a choice in life between security and freedom? Incompatible, security and freedom. Anyone here think there's something wrong with that? You understand that? Right? Anyone have a problem with that? Okay. Women also want freedom. A man figures, as long as I work hard enough, I can get enough money in advance, I can afford to do the things I want to do. I'll slave like crazy now, and when I retire, I can go out fishing every day. Men understand the choice between doing what they have to do in order to maintain their security versus doing what they'd like to do, which would be their freedom. Women don't believe they have that option. But an interesting thing my friend Cliff, who runs Cliff's List, in case any of you are familiar with it, once told me many years ago. He said, a man is free until he marries, a woman becomes free when she marries. I thought that...
Again, slowly.
A man is free until he marries. A woman becomes free when she marries. She transitions the ownership papers from daddy to hubby, and now hubby is responsible for ensuring her safety and welfare where daddy had been before. Okay, because this is how women are raised. This is not how all women exist, but this is how women are raised and cultured. And so here's the real kicker. Almost every woman, when caught cheating on her man, immediately blames him. Anyone here experience that? A woman is caught cheating and immediately says, well, you didn't pay enough attention to me, or I always knew you were seeing that other girl, or he was never paying enough, you know, he wasn't good to me, he was ignoring me, or he wasn't making me feel good. There's always a justification that exonerates the woman from responsibility. Because culturally, we've told women, you are not responsible. You do not have authority over yourself. You must do what you're told. And someone else is responsible for picking up after you. Because, sorry ladies, you are culturalized to be pets, property of someone else, who's responsible for ensuring your safety and welfare. Now, of course, you don't live that way. Interestingly, men operate under the basis that they are responsible for the woman, but they forget that with authority comes responsibility, and with responsibility must come authority. In other words, if a man is responsible for cleaning up after you, he has to be able to be certain that he can not only enforce his rules, but punish you for failure. But no man feels he can, at least not in Western culture. Personally, I believe every person is responsible for themselves and has authority over themselves. But trying to get people to accept authority over themselves when their entire life they've known that when caught misbehaving, they should lie about it. Their job is to keep the myth of well-behavior alive. So, I'm not suggesting not to trust women by any stretch. I'm not suggesting to apply force to women, ever. As a matter of fact, I'm going quite the opposite way. I'm saying if you want to be able to trust someone, you must know that they take responsibility for themselves. You must know that they themselves recognize that they have authority over themselves and responsibility for themselves. Do not allow yourself to be suckered into being in a relationship with someone of any sort in which they try to attempt to have responsibility without authority or authority without responsibility. Similarly, if your boss says to you, you have to make sure it's sunny and warm on Wednesday for our company picnic or you're fired, contact your lawyer, because it's constructive dismissal. In other words, you cannot be responsible for something over which you do not have authority. Don't allow someone to assign to you responsibility for something over which you don't have authority. Here's a big one. If your wife or someone else says to you, I'm not happy, you're not making me happy, say, hey, that's not my job. I can't make you happy. I can only provide you with situations in which you'll choose to be happy. I can only try and facilitate your happiness. You alone are responsible for whether you're happy or not. It's not got anything to do with me. But almost everyone in the world presumes that they are responsible for pleasing other people. And pleasing them is different than making them happy. You cannot be responsible for making someone angry. Hey, fellas, If any of you ever find anything I say offensive, if you take offense from something where I didn't mean to give offense, that's theft and it's wrong. You must not take offense from things I say if I didn't mean to give offense. In other words, I'm not responsible for how you interpret the things I'm saying. Every person is responsible for themselves. Now, we come back to something from before. When you recognize that women get shafted, I don't mean that in a sexual sense in this particular case, women get totally screwed over by their parents. Mommy says, you mustn't be a slut. If you give away the milk, no one will buy the cow. Which is another way of saying, don't forget, honey, we raised you to be a whore, not a slut. And Daddy says, oh, don't hook up with Gary over there. He just wants to get into your pants. Wait for Philip. He's got a good job and a career and he's going places. He'll be a good husband and father to your children. Because don't forget, honey, we raised you to be a whore. Now, for me, the only kind of woman I would ever want to spend time with is one who freely and of her own free will would choose to spend time with me. Simple as that. I offer friendship. Now, I happen to be completely madly in love with my best friend, with whom I have no secrets. Every aspect of my life she knows about. It's fantastic. People see us together and they can't believe it because they've never been with a couple where the guy never has to look over his shoulder before he tells something. Where the girl never has to hide anything. 50% of marriages end in divorce. 75% of second marriages end in divorce. This is because almost everyone marries a stranger. They marry someone who throughout the whole courtship pretended to be the way they felt their partner needed them to be, rather than actually exposing themselves to their partner. It's very, very hard to pretend to be someone indefinitely. And when the infatuation falters and you start to see the person for who they really are, it's very hard to put up with them. When the things they used to do that were endearing suddenly become annoying or unbearable. So, the most powerful thing that you can do for yourself, the most powerful thing you can do, the most compellingly attractive thing you can do, is be the person you are. And don't try to pretend you're anyone else. Anyone here ever been given the advice, just be yourself? Particularly when it comes to hooking up with girls. Every girl gives guys the same instructions. Just be yourself. Guys go, how the fuck will that work? No girl wants to be with a guy like me. Hell, the only way I can hook up with a girl that's worth having is if I bullshit like crazy to let her think I'm much better than I am. Because I already know that if she likes me for how I really am, she's too easy. Girl says, just be yourself. What's she saying? Stop bullshitting. Let me know what I'm getting into so I can make a reasonable decision for myself. Let me have authority and responsibility over myself. Let me be autonomous. And then, when I have the right to choose, I'll choose you if you're a good match. Tomorrow I'm going to talk a great deal about a bunch of things that follow from these semi-open loops I've left open in your heads. I'm going to talk a lot about eliminating jealousy, recognizing that the true value of a relationship is that when you love another person, their happiness and welfare is intrinsic to your own. It's essential to your own. And if you think that love is a selfish and possessive thing, you're crazy. Because if you truly love someone, their happiness and welfare must be ensured by you if you participate in their life, or else it's painful for you. So, trying to keep someone to yourself when they don't want to be there is psychological, spiritual, and emotional cancer. It eats away at the relationship and destroys you. You must encourage your beloved to experience the best life they can, recognizing that sometimes that might mean they need to move on, whether for a little while or forever. If you love them, you'll want what they know to be best for them, and you'll do what you can to convince them that you're their best option. Now, I'm going to leave those open for now. Close a couple of things from a little bit earlier. When you offer someone yourself completely integrous, full integrity, not attempting to demonstrate yourself as being any cooler than you are, not trying to hide your mistakes or your failures, owning your shit. All the mistakes you've ever made you the person you are right now. Trying to pretend you never made mistakes doesn't make you look better. It makes you smell of the shit that's in your baggage that you're carrying around because you're not able to digest it and leave it behind. Make mistakes. Make as many mistakes as you can. Every attempt yields a success. To become successful, you'll need to have made a lot of attempts. Some of them will not have given you the results you would have liked. But there's no such thing as a loss, just a lesson, is something I was told today. Increase the size of your world. Accelerate your growth by realizing that being afraid of failure is being afraid of the results of not making an action. Failure is only the opposite of success in the context that success is any outcome. Any outcome. So, make attempts. Do not allow your ego to say, don't make an attempt, you'll be embarrassed. Instead, you have to talk to your ego. You have to say to it, hey, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting different results, that's incredibly stupid and embarrassing. What will really make you suffer, ego, is if everyone, including me, realizes I'm being an idiot by failing again and again and again in the same way by not making an attempt. When you laugh at yourself, you feel humiliated by your failure to act. Pretty soon your ego becomes no longer something trying to keep you from doing things, but rather it becomes your biggest booster. My ego talks to me all the time. It says, what are you waiting for? Go on. It never ever says, oh, don't do that. It might not work. Other people will think poorly of me. My ego says, go for it. You're good at everything you do. And I have to keep stopping myself going, well, yeah, okay, it sounds great, but you know, I got to be a little more practical. Yeah, I did read this book on how to walk on a tight wire, and I read it 25 times, cover to cover, but I've never actually walked on a high wire before, so I'm not going to walk across the falls. Okay? Not going to try and walk across between these two buildings on this tightrope, even though I've read the best book ever written on the subject. Because I haven't tried it yet at 2 feet high. Okay? So, there's no substitution for experience. Experience is the best teacher. And in fact, most of the time, when you try something and it doesn't work out the way you would have liked it to, despite your best efforts, if you stop yourself, say, okay, why didn't that work? Be introspective and circumspect. Look at yourself from the outside and say, oh, okay, I get it. I see what I did wrong. It wasn't a design problem. It was a launch problem. Okay? It failed not because there was something wrong with the idea. It was circumstantial. The company picnic on Wednesday was a washout because there was a storm. Not really my fault. But next time, I'm going to set the company picnic to be someplace where there's a big tarp so we can all climb under it in the event it rains. So you revisit your premises so that you don't make the same mistake by repeating the same exact, precise steps, expecting different results. As long as there's a discrete, identifiable difference between what you tried last time and what you're trying this time, you never, ever have to feel embarrassed, even if it doesn't work. Because each attempt is leading you successively to your ultimate success. I think it was Thomas Edison who's quoted as having answered when interviewed about inventing the first practical electric light bulb. They said, you had 2,000 experimental units before you got one that worked. How did you keep going after all those failures? said, I didn't have failures. I found 2,000 ways not to make a light bulb. So, the best and surest way to become the person that you most wish to be is be the person you are confidently. If there are things about yourself that when you look back in at yourself and you ask this question, would I want me as a friend if I met me, knowing every last thing about myself, all of my hidden stuff? Am I a bullshitter? Do I brag? Do I try and amog other guys when there are pretty girls around? Am I unreliable? Am I unethical? What is wrong with me? What deal breakers exist in my nature that if I were to meet someone who is exactly like me, I would not want them to be my friend? And all of those things you must eliminate. You must. You recognize them, and you must fix them within yourself. But you should give yourself sufficient slack that if you think to yourself, oh, I'm untidy, ask yourself, okay, do you have friends now who are untidy? You know, is that really a deal breaker? Oh, this guy, won't make left-hand turns because you still have a friend who will make left-hand turns. If you've got a problem with it, just accept it. Give yourself the leniency you would give to friends you already have. When you get to be a person that you would gladly have as a friend, love that feeling. Be that person. Other people will accept you because you won't try and present yourself as anything other than you are. Is there anyone here who feels that I've been trying to impress you? Anyone here who feels that I'm trying to big myself up in any way? Go ahead. Do you feel I'm trying to impress you?
No, I thought if I was trying to...
Oh, no. Okay. The best way I've ever found of being seen as, viewed as, and taken as impressive is by being impressive. How do you become impressive? Get to a place where you no longer feel you have anything left to prove. Just be the person you are, proud and happy that you are where you are. If there are things that task you, work towards those. As long as you know you're on the road to those successes, you're successful. You see, success, as everyone will tell you, is a journey. It's not a destination. As long as you know you're doing what you need to do to become the ways and become the person that you would like to be, you have every reason to be proud of yourself. Successfulness, I will go through a whole list of these things tomorrow. I was going to get to them today, but I was shrunk down in my time period by a bit. Successfulness is the most compellingly attractive quality a person can have. It broadcasts loudly. It's the culmination of when your self-esteem is appropriately high, your self-confidence matches to your self-esteem. Self-esteem being what you expect of yourself, how you estimate yourself. And self-confidence being what you've demonstrated to yourself, what you know to be true about you. And when the two of them are appropriately high and matched, you feel you have arrived. You feel you are where you should be. When you add to that ongoing, self-perpetuating happiness, you smile all the time. People want to be around you because it's so clear that you accept you. You're the person you'd like to be. I've never been a particularly handsome, certainly never been a particularly fit man. I've done better than most of my rock star buddies consistently with women because I've given women those things that are so desirable. I've given them the knowledge and comfort that they could go ahead and do what they wanted to do without fear of being judged or punished. I've let them know I am exactly the way I present myself to be without having to say I'm exactly the way I present myself to be, because women are intuitively and have evolved this, able to spot what you feel about yourself from a distance. A woman can sense what a man feels about himself instantly from a distance. When you walk over to a pretty girl, she can tell whether or not you're confident or not. And she'll follow your lead. If you walk over there thinking you're pretty awesome, she'll follow your lead and think you're pretty awesome. You walk over there thinking you're full of shit, she'll follow your lead and think you're full of shit. I never think of myself as a pickup artist, ever. Because to me, being a pickup artist means offering someone the illusion or the promise of security in the traditional sense, with no intention of providing it. Getting from someone something of value in exchange for the promise of something you never intend to provide. Well, that's being a con artist. And I have no interest at all in doing anything like that. So I empower women to make their own decisions. I let them know, hey, as far as I'm concerned, the system is fucked. You have every reason to make your own decisions and to feel great about yourself for making your own decisions, being validated exclusively by the results of your decisions, without any acrimony or aggravation, without any sense of guilt or anxiety over it, because you ultimately are responsible for yourself. And I will encourage and facilitate you as best I can because I like you. And interestingly enough, I've pretty much been to bed with almost every female friend I've got over the last 25 years or so, without ever doing anything more seductive than empowering them to make their own decisions. Hey guys, great word, seduction. Seduction. Whoa, what is seduction? Seduction is empowering another person with the confidence to go ahead and do what they wanted to do already. Why is seduction such a bad word? Why do people think such bad things about it? Because if you own this daughter of yours and she's got to be a virgin in order for you to be able to transfer ownership to the next guy, who has to believe she's a virgin because that's the only way his parents will believe her firstborn child, the one that will be the legacy heir, is actually related to him by blood. If you defile this virgin so that she no longer is Virgo intacte with a hymen that will bleed when she's penetrated for the first time, then daddy can't get rid of this burden, this economic problem he's got. There are many countries throughout the world, including Canada, where it is illegal to have sex with a virgin outside of wedlock. It's not a law that is followed up on. It's called it's called fornication with a person of previously chaste character outside of wedlock. It's an old law in the books because you see, rape, like when a hawk or eagle or owl, the birds of prey we refer to as raptors, when they rape, they swoop in and take something. Rape is actually theft. What we call rape now, which is sexual assault, is very different. Daddy pressed charges against you if you had sex with his virginal daughter because you had taken something from him. You had made her no longer saleable. Now our society's changed a lot. These days, you can know if your child is your own through DNA testing. You presume that your wife or your girlfriend is going to have sex with you before marriage. Even if she's never had sex with anybody else before marriage, at the time of marriage, there's no longer any reason to believe that during the quote-unquote honeymoon, that's one moon, 28 or 29 days, which, by the way, is conveniently the same length as the average woman's menstrual cycle, takes place. In the Old Testament and in Sharia law, the rule is very simple. A woman must be stayed away from for the week after the beginning of her period. This means that if she gets married immediately after her period, she will be about to enter ovulation by the 8th or 9th day. So since she's never had sex with anyone, and now for the next 28 days or so, she's only going to be alone with her husband, sequestered from all other males for this honeymoon. If she gets pregnant, it pretty much had to be his. But without her being a virgin on the wedding night, all bets are off. And yet we hang out to this outdated thing, despite the fact that DNA testing gives a much better answer. And in fact, frankly, most men would not like to do DNA testing on their children. They'd rather be absolutely confident their child is related to them by blood. Hey, he may well be. Who cares? If you love a child and tend to the child and care for the child, presume it to be your child, It presumes you to be its daddy. It's your child. Right?
Right.
Now, it's a simple, simple thing. Love is the most wonderful thing of all. Someone was asking me yesterday about, what if your beloved met someone else who was amazing? I said, that would be awesome. Maybe they'd move in with us. Because one thing I know that my beloved would need in a man in order for him to be amazing would be that he would not have any problem with me. He would not be possessive, and he would not need exclusivity. He'd just need to know that she considered him one of her favorites, and that she was respectful, and gave him full disclosure so that he could make his own best decisions. I have never cheated on a girlfriend. I have slept around on every one of my girlfriends, and I've always been very clear about that I was going to do so. There is no cheating unless you're breaking a rule. I've never gotten into a relationship in which the rule was I couldn't sleep with anyone else, except once. For 1 year, I agreed with one girlfriend that I would, because it would make her happy, not sleep with anyone else. And 4 months into that relationship, after we had been open for some time, she kept insisting she didn't want anyone else, she just wanted to be with me. Although at night she was often curling up in bed with a curvaceous bottle of scotch and drinking herself to oblivion. One day she said, I need you not to sleep with anyone else. And so I agreed to try this. By the 4th month, we weren't having sex anymore at all. Because instead, we were going to bed with each other every night. Interesting thing about men and women, very important. A man's urgency for sex goes up the longer he doesn't have it, because his evolutionary reason for having sex is to clean his pipes. It's to ejaculate. A woman's evolutionary reason for having sex, leaving aside the other reason, which is because it can feel good, is twofold. First, her evolutionary reason is because it's to become pregnant. And the second reason is to pay the rent. A woman can only become pregnant for about 9 hours a month. 9 hours a month, during which the egg, separated from its follicle, travels down through the fallopian tubes into the uterus before, if it does not become impregnated, it withers and dies. So in order for a woman to become pregnant during that time, for a few days before it, her body sends her signals saying, harvest sperm now. She goes into what's called estrus. It means heat. And interestingly, during this time, she does not find her pair-bonded partner particularly compelling. In fact, she doesn't really want him around, because once she's gotten to the point where he smells like family, he has become familiar. Her brain chemistry says, wait a second, you don't want this one. This one could be your brother, and your children will be born damaged. He's become so familiar, you want someone else. So there are those special days, the days of each month. You may not even recognize it's happening when you dress a little bit tardier. You're wearing higher cut things and lower cut tops and smaller outfits and higher heels. And you're checking out every guy as you see them going, I could do him. I could do him. I can definitely do him. Those days are your bodies saying to you, harvest sperm from strangers. Take it in, let them fight it out inside you, because then when you release your egg, there's going to be all sorts of sperm there to increase the likelihood of your becoming pregnant. If men understood that this was women's nature, that a woman's desire for sex climbs very quickly as she's having satisfying sex. A man's desire for sex drops very quickly once he's having consistent, satisfying sex. So a pair bond of two people, guy and girl, first day, they're having sex like crazy. Second day, still having sex like crazy. 2 weeks in, spending all their time together, his urgency to ejaculate has dropped off like crazy because he's already fired off all his swimmers. Her desire is still super high because she's been having lots of satisfying sex, and suddenly he's no longer that enthusiastic. And she goes, what the fuck? Wait a second, now I'm all horned up and you don't want me? And nothing is more painful for a woman than to feel sexually rejected, because she's been raised her whole life to understand that her sex is the most valuable thing she can offer. Her validation comes from the quality of man she can find to sponsor her. If a woman feels a man is not taking her up on her offer of sex, she pretty much has no option but to hate him or decide he's gay, so that she can exonerate herself, because it is so unpleasant and painful for a woman to have to accept that this man has said to her in all meaning, "You are worthless to me. Your best thing is your punani, and I don't want it. That makes you valueless." Very painful. This is why women generally don't make it really obvious when they want you, because they know that as long as they can in their mind equivocate for themselves, "All night long I was going like this, how could he have not known?" Women send little signals hoping you'll make a move, because they don't want to expose themselves to the potential of having to accept that you did not make a move when you knew all you had to do was make a move. Of course, there's that funny bit. There's a very good reason why women will not walk across a room to start up a conversation with you out of the blue most of the time. It's not because of the simple fear of rejection. Most women are not actually afraid of that for the most part. It's much worse than that. She won't walk up to you because no matter how cute you seem, if she gets over to you and you're stupid or annoying, she can't get rid of you. The moment she started and green lighted you by starting a conversation, she knows you will not back off. She'll have to be downright hostile and rude to get rid of you, and even sometimes that won't work. She'll probably have to leave the venue. So if you ever wonder, why doesn't that girl come over? If she's actually so turned on by me, why isn't she coming over? Because she doesn't know whether or not she's going to regret it. One more last thing. There's a very, very, very simple reason why, actually two more last things so I've got the time. There's a very simple reason why women don't have a lot more sex. They'd love to. Women would love to have as much sex as they possibly could. The problem domain is, it is very, very, very hard for a woman to meet someone who is sex-worthy. What does sex-worthy mean? Well, as we were talking about a little earlier, someone else was speaking about this. A man requires this very hard-to-find combination in order to find someone new, sexually interesting enough to want to go to bed with them. They need to be simultaneously attractive enough and willing. That's the combination most men require in order to be ready to go to bed with somebody. Attractive enough and willing. That sound right? Anyone? Attractive enough and willing. Okay? For women, if it were as simple as they're being attractive enough and willing, women know, and men certainly know, that women would have no trouble finding men who would be willing. So the reason they're not getting laid all the time is because their standards must be ridiculously high, right? Well, guess what? Their standards have virtually nothing to do with your looks at all. In fact, overwhelmingly, your looks are at most a nice feature after the fact. A woman in spur of the moment, particularly when she's about to ovulate, will be checking you out for your looks. 25 out of 28 days, it's much, much less important to her. The rest of the time, she wants to know whether or not you're actually a real person. She wants to know that you're a character that is reliable and consistent, whether you actually are the person you present yourself as, whether you are just being yourself. Because what she wants least of all is to go to bed with you and then afterwards feel used. Nobody likes to feel used. You guys don't want to take some girl out believing she's going to go to bed with you, spend a fortune on it, and then have her say, "I think we should just be friends." Oh, it's not just a rejection, it's that she played me. Nobody wants to feel used. A woman does not want a man who suggests he's going to be someone to provide her with security and comfort and ongoing relationship when all he wants to do is get his dick wet and then he's gone. If a man is very clear about who he is and what he wants, absolutely direct, and empowers the woman and say, "Hey, look, I think you're really cool. I think you're really fun. I really hope that we get to go to bed with each other soon. because I think I can provide you with a lot of fun. I know that you'll provide me with a lot of fun. And from there, we can see where our relationship goes. So the girl comes into it with her eyes wide open and keeps them wide open, at least until that last moment you say, close your eyes, darling, this stuff can sting. She goes into the experience knowing what she's getting into and not believing you're telling her anything that she will ultimately feel had been a lie or she had been played. No one wants to feel used. Interesting thing, no girls. Alan was saying, girls who have nothing but good things to say about him are the girls he's never been to bed with. Without meaning to compete, because I'm not. Since I've pretty much been in bed with all my girlfriends, and pretty much all my girlfriends have nothing but good things to say about me, because I was always honest. They always knew where they stood. They always understood that it was always in their court. Hook up or not, cool. Nothing's going to change in our relationship. I like you enough to have you as a friend. Therefore, I'm going to treat you as a friend. If you want to get laid by me, great. I'll have sex with you as a friend. Geez, I wish I found guys hot. Then I'd fuck all my friends. But I don't, so I live with that. Much more tomorrow. He wants to have sex with me, but I don't find him hot.
Johnny Soporno! So, he would have gone on forever if I didn't stop him. You guys don't know that, but I do, and Steve Pilpina knows that too.